Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name is Ivana Hurdenque if you're new here, and if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today is Wednesday, May the 11th, and today we are talking about the capture of jailer Vicky White and escaped inmate Casey White. Now, you might remember that Vicky White and Casey White, no relation there, just the same last name, escaped from a Lauderdale County jail on April the 29th. That was Friday, April the 29th. They were on the run for 10 days, and they were captured in Evansville, Indiana on Monday afternoon. Now, Vicky White has since died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and Casey White is actually back in Alabama after being extradited yesterday. There's been a lot that has happened over the last couple of days. So today I am joined by our reporter, Bill Thornton. He is in Evansville, Indiana, where the pair was captured on Monday. That was, again, just before Vicky White had died by a self-inflicted gunshot wound there. So, Bill, this has been a whirlwind last couple of days. It's been a whirlwind, really 10-day capture. You went to Indiana yesterday. Me and our reporter, Carol Robinson, went to Florence. We did some reporting in Florence yesterday where the Lauderdale County Sheriff's Office is, and we met with the sheriff. You, again, went to Evansville to kind of get a sense of what the Vicky White and Casey White's last several days were, especially the last several days of Vicky White's life. Now, we know they spent about 6 days in Evansville, which is a long time for a town like Evansville. So tell me, once you've been in Indiana, once you got there yesterday, what you've learned about the pair and their time there.
Well, the first of all, the motel where they were staying is right on kind of the main drag that goes right through town, but it's not downtown. It's kind of on the periphery. Evansville is right on the Ohio River. It's a pretty nice town. There's like a casino here. There's a horse track. There's a lot of historical monuments, things like that. I'm in a park. There's some nice restaurants and everything. But the part of town that they were in was kind of, there's a lot of traffic. But that was, that hotel has kind of had a reputation from what I understand. But anyway, they were there kind of trying to lay low. I think the sheriff, Dave Wedding, the sheriff here in Indiana, said that Casey White had told him that they were basically there to kind of rest up and figure out what their next move was. But I think that the interesting thing from the law enforcement here was they were surprised that they would have stayed here this long. And it's not, Evansville's not like on 65. It's kind of off the main grid. There's an interstate here, but it's not one of the main ones that you take to get someplace else like St. Louis or Chicago or whatever. So, they might have had a reasonable expectation that nobody would be looking here in the short term. But then they did the interesting thing is that, they evidently bought a car in Tennessee, the truck that was eventually found here. And the truck was left at a car wash with the windows down and the keys in the ignition. You can make your own assumptions. Maybe they wanted somebody to steal that truck and take it someplace else and take the heat off of them. But they very, very deliberately left it there in pretty residential area. The guy who runs, or the guy who's the manager of that car wash, said he felt kind of spooky about it when he went up to it. But when the marshals and local law enforcement found that truck, they didn't really believe that they were still here until the Cadillac that they had bought. And the other thing too is that when they looked at the film from the car wash, that's when they saw Casey White get into that gray colored Cadillac. So they knew that was probably the car that they were in. And then when they found, when somebody checked out the plate on that Cadillac in the motel parking lot and it matched, they were like, well, they can't possibly still be here in town, right? But then they realized that they were, which is what led to the chase.
Well, and apologies to my dogs barking in the back. This is still a working from home situation, so we'll just ignore them and keep going there. But again, this timeline is so interesting because Vicky White of the Lauderdale County Sheriff's Office, and then Casey White, again, he was an inmate at the time in that jail there in Florence who was awaiting a capital murder trial. He also was serving an unrelated sentence in the Department of Corrections. He was actually moved to this Lauderdale County facility in Lauderdale County in the Florence region in February. But the two walked out of that jail on Friday, the 29th. You mentioned, Bill, that one of those vehicles, so they essentially left that facility, dumped the patrol car just a few minutes minutes away from the facility, got into a separate vehicle. That vehicle was later found in Tennessee. There was no vehicle sighting or there was no dumping of a car. They were in that vehicle that they switched to in Tennessee until they found it again at that car wash in Evansville. Now, you made an interesting point there, because when that car was discovered, people said, well, surely there is no way that they are still in Evansville. Why would you still be there? There has been no found connections to the Evansville, Indiana area. There's been no relatives or friends that have been located of the pair. So I think that bears repeating, that it seems like a very random place to hide out. But as you said, Casey White apparently told the sheriff's office there in Indiana yesterday that that's exactly what they were doing. They were using it as a hideout.
Well, one thing, if you're not a criminal and if you're not somebody who is on the run, uh, you sometimes forget that anybody can have a plan to get out of jail. But what do you do after that? How do you keep it up for a week, a month, a year, 2 years, 10 years, whatever? And a lot of times you may have a great plan to get out of jail, but staying away from law enforcement from that point on, it becomes more of an issue. I believe that Sheriff Wedding said that when they opened the car, they found about $29,000 left from the 90-something thousand dollars that she still had, which shows you that they, if you do the math, it seems like they blew through a lot of that money in a week's time. Probably, the sheriff said that they purchased the Cadillac somewhere around here, evidently, or someplace anyway. I don't think that part of it's come out yet, but if you think about, if you blow through $75,000 in a week's time, and you've still got to figure out what you're going to do, you realize that they didn't really know what they were going to do at this point.
Well, and again, you talk about that footage from the car wash. I'm sure most people have seen that by now. If you haven't, we have those photos on AL.com. We're going to leave links to all of our reporting here and Bill's reporting that he's been doing while he's been in Indiana. But that footage shows, again, Casey White, hard to hide. Casey White, again, being nearly 7 feet tall. It's hard to hide him even in security camera footage. You can see just the relation. While you obviously don't have a yardstick, you can see the relation of his height compared to the vehicle or other things in that footage. So they see him get into a Cadillac from there. We can make a long story short here and say law enforcement was able to find that Cadillac at a motel nearby. As you said, that motel is not necessarily off of a highway, but it is kind of a main drag in the Evansville area. So a patrol deputy actually spotted that car. Law enforcement was notified. They saw Vicky and Casey White leaving that motel, and that's when a chase started. Is that right?
Yeah, and probably the most surprising thing to me yesterday, and kind of retracing their steps, was just how brief that chase would have been, because the place where they were taken down is about 2 miles away from the hotel. So, and you have to get to the place where the chase ended. You have to drive past the municipal airport. So there's the runway and everything is right off the highway, and so it's a pretty busy area. So imagine trying to get away from law enforcement on a 4-lane road, which, by the way, is having construction on it right now. So I mean, there were a lot of strikes against them, when they started this, and I kind of think it shows the desperate aspects of their last few moments.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned the length of that chase. It was just about 2 miles. So I just to put that in perspective, that chase could have happened probably 2 or 3 times in the time that just you and I have been talking here this morning. So that just puts that chase into perspective. A very short chase that ended in a crash off of a ditch, actually, in that Indiana area. So that chase ends there. Police go to the car, authorities go to the car, and they pull Casey White out of the car. And the first thing reportedly that he says is, "Help my wife. She shot herself. I didn't do it." Is that what you heard there in Indiana? And again, we'll excuse my dogs wanting to chime in as well.
That's okay. Yeah, the sheriff said, it was asked specifically if they have any evidence that the two of them got married in the last week or so, and he said they, not to their knowledge, that happen, but he wanted it clear that he didn't have anything to do with her shooting herself. And the coroner's report and the sheriff, everything checks out to the story that she did shoot herself in the head. In fact, if you could listen to the audio of the dispatchers, she is apparently telling them that she has a gun to their head with her finger on the trigger. And so pretty much, I know a lot of people at this point want to speculate that maybe he had something to do with it, but everything seems to indicate that it was a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
And then again, Casey White taken into custody there by those authorities in Evansville in the county, actually there in Indiana. He was actually brought back to Alabama late last night. I know Carol and I again were in Florence yesterday doing some reporting, and we had known that there were authorities that were leaving the Florence area to drive to Evansville, pick him up, and to bring him back. Now they were also very clear that he would not be put back in the jail where he escaped from in the first place, that he would be taken back to the Department of Corrections. They were very clear about that. And he actually got back, meaning Casey White actually got back to Alabama late last night. So it has been just a day since Monday, really, since that chase and that capture. There's been constant movement there, at least with Casey White, again, talking to authorities there, getting in that car and headed back to Alabama. So what else do we know from the sheriff's office there in Indiana yesterday, Bill? I know that you went to a press conference yesterday. And again, you mentioned that Casey White did talk with the sheriff there in Indiana.
Well, we're still. I think they're still trying to piece together the 6 days that they were here. Sheriff said that they had gotten hundreds of tips. Improbably, one of the tips was that the two of them went to a casino. As he said to me, he said, "I really find it hard to believe that a 6'9" guy would go to a casino with as many cameras as you have in that place." But they did get that report. They were reportedly in Richmond, Indiana, which is not far from here. There were other supposed sightings, within about a 200-mile radius or whatever. But again, you're going to get people who say that they saw them or whatever. I think they're still trying to kind of reconstruct what happened. But also, from the perspective of law enforcement here, this case is over with. They got him. He's back where he was supposed to be. So, they're kind of trying to tie up any loose ends or whatever. But, what they did or didn't do. I think the theory that they're operating on right now is that Casey White more or less probably stayed in the hotel room, and Vicky White would go out and get food for them or get any kind of necessities that they needed. She did. There were some wigs that were found in the car. And I think that, again, that was probably part of their plan, was until the heat died down, so to speak. But luck wasn't really with them.
Well, and we should note as well that when Carol and I went to Florence yesterday, we did try to speak with Vicky White's family, and they also declined any comment there as well. But Bill, one thing I did want to ask you is that we have seen reporting that Casey White wanted to have a shootout with police and wanted to go out essentially that way. That didn't happen. Casey White ended up going into custody after that chase without a fight. Essentially, after that chase ended in a crash, authorities were able to pull him from that car, and he did not resist authorities at that point. So tell us about that supposed plan to go out in a shootout with police and what happened to that.
The car, when they finally went through the car, they found 4 firearms. They found a AR-15 style rifle with ammunition. In fact, they found Vicky White's duty belt with her taser and other handcuffs and other things that were part of their stash. I think if you look at Casey White's, we had a story with Casey White's attorney where he was afraid that there was going to be some kind of a shootout, and the reason that he was in jail in the first place was not capital murder. He was already serving a 75-year sentence for assaulting his girlfriend, kidnapping 2 women, going on kind of a multi-state spree there back in 2015, and then after he began serving that sentence was when he confessed to that 2015 murder for hire, which is what he was about to go on trial for anyway. So, it's kind of his MO. If you want to speculate, why did Vicky White shoot herself? Maybe because she didn't want to participate in that sort of thing. You could maybe ask that question, her being from law enforcement, but that's just speculation at this point because nobody really knows what was on her mind at the end.
And unfortunately, too, at this point, it's likely that we will not know what was on her mind or what she was thinking thereafter. Again, she has died from what authorities are calling a self-inflicted gunshot wound that happened during that chase and crash on Monday afternoon.
One thing, if there are so many unanswered questions in all of this that we will never know the answer to. And of course, the main one is why she did this. Why would a career person in law enforcement retire, sell her house, give up her pension and her life for this guy who is in jail for capital murder, and then for her to end her life like this? There's so many things that have left a lot of people just dumbfounded, and it kind of goes back to the essential nature of crime. There's a part of when people break the law that you just don't understand. You can understand perhaps somebody who steals because they're hungry or steals because they, need to pay a bill or something like that, even though, the moral aspects of it. But something like this, there's so many things that you want to ask somebody, and the fact that some of this was just inexplicable. If you ask Casey White, he probably wouldn't be able to tell you everything about why she did those things, because it would be speculation on his part too. But still, I think that's part of one of the fascinating aspects of this case, is that there's so many aspects of it where we just don't know.
Well, and I think you're right. I think that's what's captured really so much of this national attention is people saying that question, why? Again, we'll probably never know the answer as to why. But I do want to point out that Sheriff Rick Singleton told us yesterday, and this is again in Lauderdale County, he told us that, again, Vicky had worked at that jail for 17 years. And something that he told me that I thought was really interesting was that so many of those deputies and the people who work at that jail and that facility, they are young people very early on in their law enforcement careers. He mentioned an age, I don't know it off the top of my head, but the deputies can't actually go out on the road until a certain age. So many of them start in that facility. So as he was explaining that, he said that, many of those people, again, that were so young, 19, 20, 21 years old, they really looked up to Vicky as a mother figure. And he kept using that word. He kept saying that she was just an exemplary employee. She really was admired by many of her colleagues there. And he just kind of echoed that feeling of betrayal and just echoed a feeling of trust, and saying that you really don't know who you can trust anymore, because she would have been one of the last people he would have ever thought to have pulled something like this.
Yeah, and when it came out that it was her date that she was retiring, she turned her papers in. The very first thing I wondered is, well, were they going to have a retirement party? What was the atmosphere like in that office when they were expecting her to come back and she didn't? And Carol's story kind of alluded to the fact that nobody wanted to believe that she was involved in this in the beginning. When we first heard about it, your first thought is, well, he obviously kidnapped her at gunpoint. There were so many people who said, well, they'll never see her alive again, figuring that he would kill her, while they're out on the run. And then one of the interesting aspects of them finding the video at the car wash was the fact that when the car pulls up and Casey White gets into it, they could see a woman inside, so they knew that she was still alive.
That's a good point there. And again, he had men's clothes, and we know that we've had reports of Vicky buying men's clothes before this escape as well, for him to have something to change into that was not that jumpsuit there from the jail. And we also know that Sheriff Rick Singleton told Carol and I yesterday that not only was he just baffled that Vicky would do this, and again, she was not somebody that he would expect to do that, and also that she was looked up to by so many of her peers, but kind of echoed that same feeling, Bill, that you were just explaining about the initial shock of saying that, maybe she was taken at gunpoint. He said, though, the sheriff of Lauderdale County said that when he saw that video of the two leaving through that Sally Port at the jail in North Alabama, he said that's when he knew. Because again, we have talked about this before. I know Carol had some really interesting insights on this several days ago, saying that Vicky walking ahead of that inmate, that was not somebody who was afraid. That was not somebody who was in fear of their lives. They were in front of Casey. She was not afraid that he would hurt her, or did not appear to be in any type of distress. So the sheriff actually talked about that video during our interview yesterday, and really said that that was when he knew that she was part of this plan.
Yeah, and even the sheriff here in Indiana said that once you saw that video, you knew exactly what was going on, because no law enforcement person would allow that to happen. You wouldn't let one person go with one inmate like that, let alone walk in front of them or whatever. So he said once, if anybody who had any kind of a training saw that video, they'd know immediately what was kind of going on.
Well, and Bill, I know again, you spent yesterday in Evansville. You were there today reporting live from Evansville. Carol and I were in Florence, and I know several other of our colleagues have been working so hard on this story as well. But you mentioned that Evansville and Indiana authorities there are saying, look, that their part in this is done. The Casey has been captured. Vicky was captured until she has died. So they're saying that their work there is kind of finished. And also, again, the marshals have done their job. They have caught the suspects. So they're not involved anymore as well. So now we are left again with Casey back in Alabama in prison, facing the charges of capital murder that he was already in jail for, facing the charges he was already also in the Department of Corrections for, that was a 75-year sentence. And then presumably we'll have more charges and more cases to come with this escape. So is that what's next for this pair?
The Indiana authorities say that they will not charge Casey White for any offenses here because they figure the offenses that he's charged with in Alabama are much greater. So, yeah, as far as the next step, I'm sure everything is pretty much based in Alabama.
Look, a 10-day escape, their 10-day search, nationwide manhunt for the two. Even though that lasted just 10 days, we know that people will be talking about it for days and weeks to come. Bill, thank you so much for your reporting. Be safe getting back to Alabama from Indiana. We appreciate it. We appreciate you, again, picking such a good spot here to explain all of this to us and for your reporting.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Everybody watching, thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.